Hello everybody and welcome to Ensemble Salons. I'm Shana Jackson, the curator of Ensemble, and together with London Games Festival, we've been working on highlighting the achievements of BAME talent in the video games industry. These are people who are making games you love and creating paths forward for interactive entertainment. We've so far showcased 24 hugely talented UK creatives from all sorts of disciplines: art and audio, writing and coding, even game streaming and marketing. By showing off diverse voices that make games, we can attract more talent into our sector and create even more vibrant worlds for us to play in. The salons are a chance to offer a better understanding of the careers of this year's 8 Ensemble stars. Every month, we'll be asking one of our stars to interview another, which will build up into an exciting chain of talks. Today, we focus on Nihal Tharoor. He is the CEO and co-founder of mobile game studio Electric Noir. He also created Electric Noir's BAFTA-nominated interactive series Dead Man's Phone. It's an interactive crime drama where you investigate and solve murders through the smartphone of victims. Nihal is chief writer and narrative designer on the series. Season 1 explores racial profiling in modern Britain and features an ensemble BAME cast. At the start of 2020, it was nominated by BAFTA as Mobile Game of the Year. So thanks again to our partners at British Council and Mayor of London. Without their support, Games London couldn't deliver this event. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Shana. Everybody, welcome to Ensemble Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Thank you so much for coming. And if this is your first one, then no problem. Well, warm welcome to you. Nihal, obviously, you have had a ton of responsibilities as CEO and co-founder of Electric Noir Studios. But let's just take things back and go back to where we should be starting, which is naturally the start. So from when in video games did you start to play them and become part of your life, and how did they actually impact you?
It's interesting. Yeah, I've kind of had two lives with video games. It was like growing up in the 90s and in the noughties, there was so much part of my life. I mean, my waking life from, you know, the early days of the N64 and PlayStation, playing Super Smash Brothers and Crash Bandicoot and Worms. I mean, this is literally probably way too much of my youth was spent on them. And then into the noughties, kind of the more kind of adult games like GTA really influenced me. And I was really into it. But then it's kind of in my, I guess when I went to uni or my kind of beginning of adulthood, I kind of left it a bit, and I didn't really, you know, engage with the games as much as I once did, and I really didn't. I kind of had that in my past, but I never thought I would kind of come back to. I mean, if you told me, you know, 5 years ago I'd be running a game studio, I really wouldn't believe you at all, because it just wasn't really part of who I was then. But it really all just kind of reignited for me when we had this this idea for this mobile game, Dead Man's Phone, and just purely trying to realize that vision kind of thrust me and my co-founder from advertising, where we were kind of having very happy careers out there, back into the world of games. And it's just been this amazing kind of full circle to come back into games now, you know, in my late 20s, and really start engaging with it, and all the incredible work now that's being done by these really small teams. So yeah, I mean, it's just been quite an interesting journey.
Given that Dead Man's Phone obviously became a big changing point in your life, what made you decide to focus on that specifically as your entry into games development?
Well, yeah, I mean, so we were just in this advertising gig, me, my co-founder Ben, and we had this kind of email chain that went around the office about this soap opera that was taking place in South Africa on a WhatsApp conversation. And, you know, without any thought of game or gaming at all, we just thought that's struck us as an interesting way to tell a story. That was the premise of it. It was just, wow, like, you know, telling a story through someone's WhatsApp phone, through a conversation, that seemed like a new way of telling stories that felt quite relevant. And so we just kind of followed that thread. And I think very quickly it led us to the idea of, you know, imagine a murder detective with the phone of a murder victim. I mean, that's a real experience that police detectives go through every day now. When there's a murder, it's probably the first point of call when you're trying to solve a murder, is to look at the victim's phone. And we just were just struck by the wholeness of that idea and the kind of how interesting and compelling it felt to us as a way of telling stories. And we just wanted to realize that. So I mean, it was only after realizing it, I guess, we realized the label game would be the best way to describe what we wanted to do. But it wasn't, yeah, it wasn't kind of led by the idea of, you know, we want to go into the games industry and we want to create a game studio. It was just this one idea, and this, what we see is this kind of potentially this new storytelling medium. And then realizing, oh, if we want to do this, well, we're going to have to go and start a game studio and to go into the games industry. So it was a bit backwards, I suppose, to most people who might have kind of always had a dream, like, I want to get into games and I want to make a game and I want to do a game studio. That all really happened after we had the idea. We were like, oh, I guess to make this, we need to do that. So it was slightly, I guess, an unusual entry point.
I can imagine that must have been really, really daunting all of a sudden to realize that, oh, hey, we're kind of going in here, but wow, okay, this is a whole new world that's suddenly opening up to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm quite a lazy person, believe it or not, instinctively. And when I was in advertising, you work in a creative team, so I was the writer, and my partner Ben was the art director, and they hire you in advertising agencies as teams. So you're like wedded together. So we were already in this quite long-term creative partnership. And it's funny, we had the idea for Dead Man's Phone, and Ben was like, oh my God, this is amazing. We got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do this. And my first reaction was like, oh God, this is going to be a lot of effort. Like, that's genuinely how. So, oh God, I kind of wish I didn't come up with this idea. I'm going to have to do like extra work now. But thankfully, I've got this really amazing creative partner who's just he has a very strong work ethic, and it really propels me forward. And it always has, and it continues to do so. And yeah, we just kind of really put our back into it and started doing a lot of work on the side, so much so that we were actually fired from our jobs because I don't think we were doing very well in the advertising game. But again, that ended up being a blessing because, you know, we were sacked and we were like, we don't have any kids, we're young enough. Why don't we just try to take a punt on this idea that we've been kind of nurturing for the last few months? And that's really, that's how it started. And actually, tomorrow is our 3-year anniversary since we founded the studio. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, that's how it came about.
That's, for me, that's incredibly courageous on so many levels, because you are always taking a risk when you go into games development. And having made that jump, having gone through full-time job and then eventually made that jump into it, that's a massively brave thing to do.
It helped that we got sacked, for sure. What else are we going to do right now?
Well, the first thing is like panic. You go, oh my God, but you took it on.
Suddenly it went from panic to like, oh my God, this is our chance. It was one of those moments, I suppose. But...
Well, taking Dead Man's Phone and going back to the fact that there was that courage there to make that jump across. Obviously, not many video games tend to go into stuff like racial profiling, and with you creating this acclaimed interactive crime drama and that being such a fundamental part of that sort of genre as well, was that something that was on like in the back of your mind? It's like, well, would the audience kind of be receptive to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's just always been the stories that have interested me the most. You know, growing up and the kind of, you know, if we're talking about on one side about the games that influenced me, in many cases, the things that are more relevant to what I'm doing is the you know, the TV shows and the movies that influenced me, because I really see what we're doing more, although of course it is an interactive game, I really see the essence of it as more a reflection of the kind of shows like, you know, The Wire or The Sopranos, or those kind of heavyweight dramatic shows that are just totally inspired me when I was young. I continue to do so, and you know, those kind of shows, you know, these kind of long form content shows which kind of tell stories over seasons and hours, where they can really build characters, like that's fascinating, I think, to me. And you know, I've always been kind of drawn to those kind of narratives which I guess don't get told or kind of make people a bit uncomfortable. You know, I kind of I did American studies as a degree at university, and my dissertation was all on slavery in Hollywood and how slavery has been depicted in Hollywood, going all the way back to Birth of a Nation, which is one of the first films ever made, which actually kind of gave a new rise to the KKK in America in the early 20th century. And all the way to when I was writing it, to 12 Years a Slave. And it was just really interesting to see the evolution of that and the way these kind of issues have been depicted over time. So I guess I was already kind of predisposed, if I was able to have complete creative control over a narrative medium and totally be able to choose the stories I wanted to tell, I think I knew immediately I would first gravitate towards you know, the issues of racism. I think that's always been something that really interests me, and certainly it's not limited to that. And we've been working on new series again that deal with other issues. But I think, yeah, I think it, you know, first and foremost should be entertaining, but then to be able to also explore issues which are meaningful to society and really get people to reflect on these topics. I think it's just an awesome opportunity. And like we think that most people who have a TV show, they have to deal with all these kind of TV execs kind of putting their foot in and like trying to mess with it. And we can do whatever we want. Like we're the masters of this new medium. And if we want to tell these stories, nobody will stop us. And what's been really rewarding is to see the reception. I mean, I think a lot of people assumed if we're going to tell a narrative about young Black teenagers in London, it's not going to connect with people outside of that world, which I think is a stupid thing to say, because it's about telling human stories with human insight. And if you do that, it can be about anything. And we've seen that already with this Dead Man's Phone, that most of our audience are women in America who are connecting with this narrative, which, you know, their world might be foreign, but I think, you know, it's you're still able to connect with it, I think, if you're drawing on that kind of human insight. So it's been quite, yeah, it's been great to see that we don't need to cater to an imagined kind of audience or worry about what people will think about it. And that actually, if you kind of write it from the heart and you really, you know, you really tell the stories you want to tell, you know, it will find a reception.
I think that's outstanding in itself. And what you hit the nail on the head there, and being able to tell the stories that you want to tell and tell them and ground them in truth and reality there. And it's brilliant to see that your audience expanded as a result from that. I think what's also really, really good to see as well is that you got critically rewarded for it as well by being BAFTA nominated, which is just absolutely outstanding. Tell us what that felt like when you first got the notification.
Yeah, it's funny. We got an email through it. It almost felt like a spam email, because it just came in from some guy at BAFTA saying, "Hey, you've been nominated." We're like, "Oh, wait." I mean, it's funny in a way, because we're still in beta, firstly, which was quite remarkable that we were getting nominated. And we haven't actually done our, you know, we're on the Google Play Store, but we haven't done our full global release. But it didn't really sink in at first, and we were like, "Oh, that's nice, you know, to get a BAFTA nomination." But then it was when it launched, and it was like, oh, and you see the little, you know, the BAFTA icon, and you can, you know, we're BAFTA nominated. I mean, it's silly, but it's really helped. I mean, in terms of, you know, it's such a new, when you're trying to explain an idea to someone and they've not heard of this, and you'll say, oh, new medium, everyone's like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. But if you just say BAFTA nominated, people immediately go, oh, okay, so this is a thing. This is not just you're in your bedroom and you're dreaming up something. This is like been validated by someone. So it is very helpful, and it has proven, we soon after that we closed a major round of investment for our company, and that BAFTA certainly helped in that regard, and also helped to attract more talent to the company. So, I mean, we're very grateful that we were nominated. And yeah, I mean, it's still reeling from it in a way.
Is it something that you feel has now become a goal for Electric Noir Studios going forward? Just kind of like, okay, so here is something that we've done. We've been nominated for a BAFTA now. Is this something that you can kind of see and say, well, let's just keep on going for those sort of accolades going?
Yeah. I think we'd love to win a BAFTA at some point. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I want to, with what we're doing and with the kind of, I want it to keep confusing the BAFTA games and BAFTA television and film, because I want eventually the jury to be like, hey, wait, this is kind of blurring the line so much now. Why are we having these two separate BAFTAs almost? I mean, I think one day there should be, potentially a category in the BAFTAs, in the BAFTA film and television, for kind of best performance, in an interactive storytelling thing, because we're using real actors and they're delivering these really powerful performances, and this is not CGI or animated. And it's interesting. I mean, I think year on year the lines are going to get more blurred, and it's going to be hard to categorize any of this stuff. But that's a good thing, I think. And yeah, I mean, we'd love to kind of keep coming back and getting that profile.
It's clearly because you are, as a studio as well, very accomplished storytellers, and that is always kind of there as at the forefront. You always, I know, as a writer myself, you worry that people are not necessarily going to get it. And something that I was actually asked last week by Elle, or last week, a couple of weeks ago by Elle, is the key to good storytelling. And I think that is actually a fantastic question to ask you, coming from your perspective. Now, what do you feel are the keys to good storytelling, and what are the sort of challenges that you've actually faced in storytelling in the mobile space specifically?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, it's really about human insight, I think, finding that. I mean, there's two elements to it. There's kind of in terms of the writing craft, and in our medium, it's all kind of dialogue based, and it just, when kind of dialogue really just sings off the page. There's almost a melody to it when it's good. I feel like when you're reading it, and it's got that rhythm, it's got that melody, and it's just flows. And that in any kind of great piece of kind of entertainment. I could never do prose. I'll be totally useless at writing prose, but I think I do have a good ear for dialogue, and I can see it. We've just brought some 3 new writers actually into the company through a collaboration we did with Film London, actually. So we actually actively look to try to get screenwriters into our medium. And my word, these guys are so talented, and you can just see it, when you're reading it. It, like I say, it really sings off the page. But then it's why is it singing off the page? I think, yeah, there's the rhythm to it, and there's just all these nuggets of human insight in the way they're interacting. And sometimes it can just be, it can be so simple, the scene, the way you set it up, but it's just kind of, it's in those tiny little moments, that crafted moments that just say so much more than the words themselves. And so there's that amazing craft when it's done well. And then kind of zooming out, it's that whole story, what are you trying to tell? Like, one of the things we're trying to do now with the new seasons of Dead Man's Phone, we have kind of a few questions we're asking, as we're calling them like season premises, and we essentially bring them to each other. We kind of talk about it in this very collaborative environment, and kind of look at the ideas. And one of the questions we ask is, what is this story really about? And we kind of underline really. It's like, because, what are you actually trying to say? Like, get to what is the essence of what you're trying to say? And if you can get that really tight, a whole potentially 5-6 hour season, what is it about? And if you can articulate that, I think in a kind of very clear way, and it really just hits you, I think then you're in a really good place to write a powerful story. So yeah, I think it's that kind of clarity of that.
And did you come across any particular challenges when you were kind of like, obviously it was all integrated to make sure that you're taking advantage of the medium and the format through a mobile phone? With a lot of people kind of having certain perceptions of what they feel mobile gaming is about. Did you come across any challenges in your storytelling when you were kind of putting it together?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of working within the limitations and of the medium. I mean, we're kind of inventing this medium as we go of telling stories through the phone. In a way, one of the things is kind of having to rein it in, because you've got to construct this world. It's not actually someone's phone, because if you actually had someone's phone, it would just be too overwhelming. You wouldn't get any narrative in it. You just pick it up, you're like, there's like 20 apps, there's a million texts, there's all these things. Like, none of this is telling me a story. This is way too overwhelming. Doesn't make any sense. So really, the challenge for us was to then, we're creating that impression. We're not actually creating the phone, and we're kind of constructing this world and really leading people through it. And one of the things we've kind of really believe is kind of it's telling a very coherent narrative, and it's about, many times it's about the illusion of agency. We're not actually trying to give the player complete freedom, because that, if they actually had complete freedom, there would be no story to tell. I mean, we really believe we want that they're going through a very structured, coherent narrative that you've crafted as the narrative designer and the writer. And that they're fine with that. They don't want complete freedom. They want to be told a story. They want to have the illusion that they're in control, but really you are kind of crafting this narrative for them. So it was about learning that, and not being too kind of purist about the idea of, it has to be a real phone and it has to be exactly like a real phone would be. It was the learning process that actually, we can play with it a bit. We can simplify it. We can craft it as much as we like, and people will accept it as long as a coherent narrative and a compelling story is coming out of it. So that was it. I think learning to put up the limitations and the walls within the medium.
Okay. Well, given that you've created this really convincing interactive crime drama world, this is something that obviously a lot of people are out there or would be interested in. And there are some people that write in that sphere, in that particular genre as well. What sort of research did you have to do? Did you have to kind of get into the real grit to kind of get to the bones of what you were writing about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge part of the process for us is the research element. And I think that kind of, that starts from the moment you have the concept for the story, and then that will just continue throughout. I mean, thankfully we've had some really strong narrative consultants who've worked on season 1. One of them was a spoken word artist and also stop and search workshop coordinator, Sharifa Energy, and she's been really a big part of the whole journey. I mean, she actually introduced us to the cast who feature in the story, who are all kind of part of her network. She's kind of looked over the narrative and sense checked it for from her experience of working in this area. And we worked with even working with the kids. I say kids, they're 15, 16, teenagers. And it's funny, for example, with the slang in the experience, like I was very important that if somebody who was 15, 16 years old living in London and heard it, would be like, yeah, that's exactly right. And if they're not saying that, then we've totally failed. So, you know, I originally wrote it, and then I had a whole workshop with the cast where they went through the script and basically were like crossing out, you know, lines. Basically, they said it sounds right, but it sounds like it was written 10 years ago, which I guess speaks to my age of when I was in school. So some of the words have continued, and then there were a whole new one. So that was you know, interesting. It may seem like a superficial point, but I think it speaks to that level of authenticity that we want to bring. If we're going to be telling a story in a specific world, then we have to, you know, really understand it and get as much research as we can to tell those stories. And yeah, I mean, it's something we've done on the storytelling side in terms of in this case, in terms of the victim, but also even in the police side. I mean, a narrative consultant for the whole of Dead Man's Phone is an actual murder detective. His name is Detective Simeon Cryer, and he's worked in the Bristol major crimes for about 20 years. And he's actually a consultant on the project, and he's been really, you know, really valuable in terms of when we're developing the story. You know, I think actually to be a detective, you have to have a really good instinct for storytelling in a way. It's quite interesting, and he's really helped us develop the narrative on that end and make sure everything's very authentic, because we really didn't want to tell a kind of CSI, you know, narrative. We wanted to get, you know, very kind of hyper real impression of what it is like to be in the a police detective as well. So from both angles, we've really tried to do a lot of research and really bring that to bear in the storytelling.
And I think it really does show the amount of due diligence that you've put through into making the game and getting that spot on, because you already mentioned things like Sopranos and The Wire, and these are shows which are high prestige shows that again show the amount of research that's required to make them come to life.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I mean, that is the kind of the North Star of, I mean, particularly The Wire. I mean, the creators of it literally were in the police force and journalists in Baltimore for like 20 years. So that's a level of understanding your subject matter to you know, and to another level. And I'd always hold that up as, you know, obviously, well, we can't ever reach that heights, but that should be the guiding principle. I mean, that, and it, yeah, as you say, it just shows, you know, you can feel it and everything about those shows, like the authenticity of it. You know, whether or not you know that world, I think you can just feel it, and it's just a kind of instinctive thing. You know, this has been done right. You know, this is capturing a reality in a way.
Well, you say that you can't reach those heights. You may well. I mean, out of the gate, you got BAFTA nominated, so you're certainly on the way. If you feel, even if you feel you're not quite there yet. Well, obviously, I think in the past you've described that you want Electric Noir Studios to be the HBO of story games, which is obviously just a massive goal in itself. But you're, like I say, you're already clearly on the way. What were your plans, if you can tell us, of how you intend to really kind of like go down that path and how the actual ambition came about?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, when we started the studio, you know, we really thought we were just creating this kind of one game, Dead Man's Phone. But it was a kind of process of doing it that we started to realize a much bigger vision of what we were doing, which was actually this format for telling these stories. It could be, we want it to live on a platform itself. So we think that, firstly, we think the way that we're telling the stories, these interactive stories through the phone, is potentially, you know, it's a very accessible I'm thinking in the kind of investment side now. I mean, it's scalable in terms of the way we're doing it. So if you've looked at stuff like Bandersnatch, for example, we've seen the interactive movie kind of come to the fore many times, but we can see there's a lot of appetite for it, and really that's the audience that we're after. It's these kind of people who might not necessarily have ever even played a mobile game, but they like these interactive storytelling experiences. And, you know, when Bandersnatch was that very big success, it showed that the potential of these things to really enter the mainstream of the culture in a way that interactive storytelling hadn't before. And we really think that our format has the potential to kind of really enter the cultural mainstream, because it has these three elements. And this is the kind of pitch that we give to the investors, which is that firstly, it's very accessible. I mean, if you know how to use a phone or a smartphone, you intuitively understand our experience in this and what's going on. So it's very accessible across demographics, across ages. It's also very scalable, which is what investors very much like to hear, because, I mean, if you look at something like the interactive movie, like Bandersnatch, they've essentially had to create 4 episodes of Bandersnatch and condense it into one interactive experience. Yeah. But our format, because it's just reflecting the phone, it's mainly text, because if you look at your phone, your phone is about 75% text and about 25% other media, photos, videos, audio. And actually the photos and videos actually you don't want them to be high production. They're more authentic when they are kind of handheld, and so not all glossy and overly polished. So in terms of scaling this kind of storytelling, it's a lot cheaper to make, basically, is the punchline. And then finally, in terms of immersiveness, we think it's quite powerful, because again, I keep comparing it to Bandersnatch because that's the leading thing with actors, not with CGI. But in Bandersnatch, you're kind of controlling what happens, but you're not participating in the narrative in the sense that you're not a character in the story. But obviously, in this experience, you are the lead detective in the drama. You are the main character, and so we want to essentially to create, firstly, more seasons of Dead Man's Phone, because we want to build that out, but we think we can actually branch into other genres as well. We think this format of telling stories through interactive stories through the phone certainly lends itself to crime drama, but it's definitely not limited to it. And we've already begun work on, new series in new genres with the same premise of using the phone. And I guess the long kind of the ambition would be in 2, 3, 4 years from now, we've kind of grown out this platform of ours, and we have, multiple interactive series in different genres. And we're getting to a point where essentially we could be an interactive entertainment service. And it's all with that same vision of HBO of story games. So all adult, high dramatic content, interactive storytelling, and that's very accessible and anyone can jump into. And that's really the kind of pitch that got us the venture capital backing back in May of this year. And it's really what we tell people, when we're bringing on new hires and we're trying to attract more talent. And that's really the long-term vision of it. So, I mean, we see Dead Man's Phone as the flagship of this interactive story platform that we're creating.
So that's going to be very much the centerpiece of everything else that kind of surrounds it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, especially given how everything started as well. I will say, like, obviously when you're in a studio and you're kind of your own boss, how do you kind of develop your own skills, especially when you're having to spin so many plates? There's obviously everything going on around you and you're developing a game at the same time, and you still need time for personal development. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I feel like we're talking to Ben about it. I felt like we did like an MBA in business alongside creating this game, because you have to, I mean, when you're trying to like raise kind of institutional investment, it's a whole nother world and there's all these language games that they speak, which if you don't speak, you're not going to be able to kind of get them on board. And yeah, I mean, it's a whole load of plates, but I mean, it's, you know, thankfully we've really enjoyed it. And I think that there's something to be said about that kind of diversity of work kind of really keeping you inspired and on your game. I mean, just jumping from like a creative meeting with our creatives where we're just thinking straight storytelling and like in that world and trying to nurture ideas, and then jumping into an investor meeting where you're trying to sell, you know, the vision and how you're going to make money with this and how it's going to scale. And then, you know, then you have to think about, you know, HR and what is our company vision, like what do we stand for, and all these things. And sometimes it can get overwhelming, but I think that's I'm so thankful that I've got my co-founder Ben and the other people on the team that, you know, you're never alone with these thoughts, and you're always able to bring it to each other and bounce off each other. And kind of, I think that's really where the learning and the growing comes from. It's kind of, you know, all being in this boat together and being able to, sometimes we're just like, what the hell are we doing? Like, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just walking into rooms and saying things and people are just nodding. But, you know, it's being part of that. I think having other people, that's kind of where you really grow and you really nurture your abilities, I think.
And is it something that you feel like, as always, the studio is going forward, that is something that you're always got to keep your eye on to make sure that you get that sense of development, as well as the fact that, you know, Dead Man's Phone wins a BAFTA and other stuff that comes with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's hopefully just by virtue of things going well, you know, we'll just keep having to grow. I mean, hopefully it'll just kind of continue on in that vein. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you know, I think Ben and I have very quickly realized that we're probably having to give up on the creative soon, in terms of like our jobs are going to be all management, and we're going to have to kind of pass the torch to these, I mean, as I say, these amazing new creatives who have joined us and who really getting the vision. And I guess that's the nature of scaling a kind of a company, that you kind of get more and more kind of high level on just like managing the boat or the ship. But that's all fun. It's all very exciting. And I was worried that, you know, what if we don't find creatives or writers who really get our vision and get my vision? But I've been so overjoyed with the talent that we brought in the last 3 months. They're so good. They're better than me. So I'm like, okay, fine, I can die now and they can still carry this on in a way. So in terms of the storytelling vision. So I'm starting to feel like, okay, fine, if I have to give up more creative duties and do more management, then that's fine, because, you know, we've got some great people on board now.
Hopefully you've got a long life ahead of you, so you don't have to worry too much about passing the reins over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's obviously, like you said, it's a big, tiring endeavor to run a studio. And for any people out there that are currently thinking about potentially creating their own studio, do you have any special tips, pointers, stuff that you know now that you didn't know necessarily when you first started out, that you probably want to impart to people?
Well, I guess, yeah, maybe a few. Well, it was good that we weren't setting out to make a game studio. It was good that was just a byproduct of it. I feel like it really put us in good stead that we had first the vision of what we actually wanted to create, and then everything else was just guided by that fact. I mean, I'm sure there've been lots of people who've just decided to start a game studio and then they've gone on to make something very successful, which they've decided on afterwards. But I think it really helped for us that we had this just from the very beginning, from the very inception. We were like, we want to create Dead Man's Phone, and then everything else was just in the service of that. And we kind of had that clarity of vision with what we were doing. But I mean, I don't know if that's necessary. Again, that's just how we got into this. But I do think what's very important is telling stories, being able to tell stories and find your story, your narrative of what you're doing, because it's going to be a huge part of the whole process, to whether you're talking to investors or you're trying to attract talent or you're talking to the media or trying to get some PR. It's all about the story that you're telling. And so you want to really find that what that is and why people should be interested and should listen and want to know more. And thankfully, I mean, I think that's true of any company or any startup, but in games, we're all pretty much quite gifted in storytelling anyway. So hopefully we can use some of that natural talent for games to our advantage, while with kind of developing a business and really getting people to buy into it and getting people excited about it. So yeah, I think that would be it.
Okay. There's actually a question that came through, and I will say that, if anyone does have any questions for Nihal, please do send them in, because we'll get to the full questions. But it links directly to what you were just talking about. And this is from an anonymous attendee. And they did ask, you already covered a bit, like anything that you wish you knew before you started this project, but also what surprised you while growing your studio?
It was interesting. Interviewing people actually was a kind of very interesting thing, being on the other side of it, and starting to see how people make the judgments about who to hire. It's not something, you spend your life kind of being interviewed for jobs, and you never really think, okay, well, how are they making their decisions? And so it's been a very interesting learning experience for me and Ben to do that process. And we've done it a number of times now. We've had to do dozens of interviews with candidates. And I think it's surprised how quickly we feel like you kind of, it's almost an instinctive thing. You kind of warming to people or not, or kind of, you have their CV and you have all that stuff. But I think it's been very interesting, because it's the most important thing in the company, and a young company, the hires that you make really define you. I mean, so much in the first few years, because you are just, the strength of the company is the ability to attract like other great minds to it, who are going to then attract more. And it's like, it's just the company at this stage is just like a room full of good brains just doing stuff. And so like that touch wood, everyone we've hired and every instinct we've had has been just totally right. And these people have just brought so much more to it. But yeah, I mean, I think what I'm saying is I thought it would take a lot more reasoning to know when we thought someone was right for us. But actually it was very instinctive, and it's something that 9 times out of 10 we knew within the first 10 seconds, and that seems a bit odd, but it's just been the case for us. And so I think that's been quite enlightening, actually.
Was there anything that you think you would have done potentially different if you knew what you do now?
What we have done different? I think we probably would have brought in a QA person earlier. I never really knew what QA was. This is my gaming ignorance, but it's something that we've been I know it's quite a specific thing, but I think hopefully it's quite meaningful for any game studio. I mean, I just thought, what's the point in the QA? And it took us bringing on a technical lead a couple of months ago. It was like, you guys don't have a QA? We need a QA person. So in terms of slowing down the coders' time and their work, But I mean, no, just generally, it's just been a constant learning experience for us. I mean, you're going to be constantly making mistakes, but I think it's just about, you know, looking back on them and chatting about it with the team and just kind of moving forward from them each time.
Okay. And one of the other questions that's coming from another anonymous attendee, they were asking, you've already talked about you looking at expanding the studio and kind of moving forward and creating different stories out there. They've kind of asked, what sort of thing would you be looking for in creating those stories? Obviously, there's only so much you can reveal at this particular point, but is there anything that you can reveal?
About what the stories are going to be, or about what?
They're kind of asking about the general stories, that sort of projects that you would be creating going forward under the umbrella of the studio. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what can I say? I mean, firstly, it's always going to be first with the format of a person's phone, but then there's going to be other elements that live outside of it. And we've kind of been working with these new creatives on board. They've been coming up with obviously seasons for Dead Man's Phone, but they've coming up with total new series premises in all kinds of genres. And it's really kind of an element of like creating a world that works and a premise that works. Obviously with Dead Man's Phone, it's a really tight premise. You're a murder detective with the phone of a murder victim. So it's about finding similar premises that kind of conceptually work, and that, you know, that can be developed out into kind of interactive stories and multiple seasons. In terms of specific genres, I'm not sure if I can. We have competitors. I don't want them to know. but I think it has legs, honestly. And particularly since having these creatives on board, they've come up with some. I mean, one idea which was like, oh my god, that could be as big or bigger than Dead Man's Phone in terms of conceptually working, and you're still using the phone and everything. So it's really, it's been so encouraging to get their fresh eyes on it and to start thinking long term, okay, where can we take this medium and what are the new stories that we can tell? So I think it'll just have to be watch this space, but it's quite exciting, we think.
Well, another question that's come in from an Oscar Robinson alarm. They've asked, were you in any way inspired by FMV games, that's full motion video games for anyone that's not familiar with that particular acronym, in the 90s? And are you currently inspired by any contemporary series?
The only one I can remember, the 90s. Oh, I'm not sure. Carmen San Diego, I think, had like a video on it. No, I think I played a lot of the Sam Barlow is quite impressive what he's done with her story and telling lies. I mean, that's, I think, currently the benchmark in terms of FMV games from what I've seen. And you know, I think he's continuing to do some really interesting work. And then there was some, you know, there was actually, this is not FMV, but it's related to Dead Man's Phone, a game that was very, very kind of, not many people know about it, but it really inspired us, was this, you know, the series Mr. Robot. It was a kind of spin-off, like a mobile game that they created off that, where you have a phone and you're kind of talking to people. So it wasn't quite as developed as what we're doing, and it was quite a few years ago, but it was really cool. And what struck us is it was very well written. It was really like, oh, this is like really engaging, and you could kind of like fuck with people. Sorry for swearing. You can like, you know, you can like text people and like manipulate them. And we thought, wow, this is like a very interesting space. And this is when we were doing research for Dead Man's Phone, we kind of stole a lot of their game design principles, which were really well thought out. So sorry if you made that game, but thank you. But yeah, I mean, it's a big inspiration for us. But yeah, I think for FMV, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that stood out. But yeah, I mean, whenever Sam Barlow has something out, I've always I always like to check it out.
Okay. Another anonymous attendee asked a very large and involved question. It may end up being our last question for the night, so prepare yourself.
Okay.
It said, how do you see the future of diversity, inclusivity in games, in the games industry? Do you think using stories to tell difficult truths will be a small independent studios leading the way still for years to come? Or do you think that public showing interest in those incredible games will bring big corporations to take interest and maybe start exploring with more diverse stories, more diverse representation?
I mean, I think it's going to be the latter. I think it's already going that way, and the big corporations, and it, you know, in our space, we're looking more towards whether that's Netflix or Amazon Prime as we, we believe what eventually they're going to see the kind of interactive entertainment space as a kind of an arm of what they're doing in terms of all their movies and TV shows, and interactive storytelling is just going to be another part of their kind of catalog of content that they produce and they grow. And I think it's going to be these stories which, you know, represent totally new groups of people and tell untold stories. Those are the ones which are really going to make a lasting impact and really connect with people. And I think they're the ones which I hope in a way are also going to do away with any of the kind of snobbiness that non-gamers in the arts world have about gaming. I think once they see that, you know, the stories being told in the games industry are in many ways more challenging and more meaningful than a lot of the TV shows which are coming out on Netflix or anywhere else. I mean, I think that's really going to help to you know, do away with all these kind of unhelpful kind of assumptions about gamers and gaming, and it's really gonna kind of enter that mainstream, that cultural mainstream, and yeah, I think it's starting off with the independent studios, and it's with all these kind of great you know, movements. It starts off small. It starts off with these kind of independent people who are really passionate about what they do, and then eventually it grows out and it gets to the point where big companies really want to represent that and reflect that in their work too. So I think we're already in that process, I think, in that transition. So I'm encouraged, and I'm really interested to see, you know, when it comes to 2030, what the state of this is going to be like. And I think it's actually going to be transformative this decade. I really think so.
I think after all the events of this year as well, we're probably going to see more people that are more receptive to that particular change as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny, we started this narrative on police racism, you know, 2.5 years ago, because we were incredibly passionate to tell it. And it's been incredible to see this year's the changes that's happened, and this kind of global awakening to these issues. And if it means that these stories can have a broader audience of people really receptive, that's fantastic. And I think it's really encouraging.
That's amazing. This isn't a question so much, but it was a lovely kind of note in the Q&As, and it's from another anonymous attendee, and they said, I love Nihal's honesty about sharing that he was fired from his job because it can help others see that failure does not define you. You can still be successful.
Sorry, no, go finish the
yeah, even if you have mishaps. Thank you, Nihal, for sharing.
Well, yeah, don't give me too much credit, because I'm only saying this now. For the first year when we were raising investment, I told everyone we quit. I was like, we quit our job, we went out and did it. Because again, coming back to my point, you're telling a story. If you're starting a business, it's all about storytelling, and you got to put the best story first. So if you're trying to raise investment, don't tell them you got fired, tell them you quit. But once you've got a BAFTA nomination, then you can tell people you got fired because it doesn't matter as much. It's all about the right story.
I mean, there are words to live by, absolutely. So we're kind of approaching towards the end now. So thank you so much for all of your answering. It's where can people find you? And obviously, where can people find Dead Man's Phone as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter, although I'm really rubbish at tweeting, at Nihal Tharoor, I think. And then Dead Man's Phone is at Dead Man's Phone on Instagram and on Twitter. And yeah, if you just go to deadmansphone.com, if you have an Android, you can download a Dead Man's Phone beta right now and play the first 3 episodes. iOS make it a bit harder, but there's a test flight link on our website, so you can check that out as well and play through the first few episodes and see what you think. But yeah, hopefully releasing the full season 1 of Dead Man's Phone in kind of early spring next year. So that's hopefully going to be very exciting to have the whole season out on iOS and then on Android.
Can people sign up anywhere to get updates as to like how things are going?
Yeah, just sign up to our Facebook page, to our Twitter page, Dead Man's Phone, and we post our regular updates to how things are going there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for your brilliant time and incredible insight across everything that I've been asked to.
Oh, thank you so much, Corey, for a great interview. Really enjoyed it.
And massive thank you to everyone out there that has sent in your questions. And we've got some really, really good stuff, and hopefully you'll find it really useful. Last thing to say, really, please do join us for the next salon, which will be on the 24th of November, where Nihal will be interviewing our very own Hollywood actor, superstar, and also my boss.
That's the real show. You got to tune in.
Oh, it's got to be good. I mean, he is my boss. That's one of my bosses, at least at Silver Rain Games, Abubakar Salim. So from personal experience, both Nihal and I know Abubakar. We'll say this: do not miss it. I guarantee it will be special.
Absolutely.
So thank you once again for everybody for tuning in. I've been Corey Brotherson, been talking to the fantastic Nihal Tharoor, and this has been Ensemble Salon 2, the BAFTA nominated sequel, along with Games London. Thank you again, and good night.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.